The year is 1216. England is on the edge. The once mighty King John is dead, leaving behind a shaken kingdom and a boy king, Henry III, just 9 years old. The Magna Carta, signed a year earlier under pressure from rebellious barons, is no longer just a document. It's the seed of a revolution that will redefine power in England for centuries to come. Henry III rules for over 5 decades, but peace doesn't come easy. His lavish spending, favoritism towards foreigners, and disregard for the Magna Carta ignite deep anger among the nobility. And from that anger rises Simon de Montfort, a name that echoes through the corridors of time. Montfort, once a friend and ally, becomes the leader of a rebellion. In 1265, he calls what many historians now call the first true parliament, inviting not just nobles, but knights and commoners. It's a spark of democratic thought in a feudal world, but Montfort pays the ultimate price. At the Battle of Evesham, he is slain. His body is mutilated by royal forces. Yet his idea that the king should answer to the people cannot be killed. It survives, and it changes everything. The crown passes to Edward I, Longshanks, the hammer of the Scots. Ruthless, brilliant, and ambitious, Edward reforms the legal system, conquers Wales, and wages war in Scotland. But he underestimates the resistance. And from the Highlands comes a name that haunts English dreams: William Wallace. Although Wallace is eventually captured and executed, the Scottish resistance carries on under Robert the Bruce. Edward I dies before he can crush the Scots. His son Edward II inherits not just the crown, but the chaos. Weak, indecisive, and scorned by his barons, Edward II faces rebellion after rebellion. His reign is marked by humiliation, none worse than the defeat at Bannockburn in 1314, where the Scots, under Bruce, shatter the English army. Eventually, Edward II is deposed by his own wife, Isabella of France, and her lover, Roger Mortimer. What follows is dark, brutal, and unforgettable. Edward II is imprisoned and, according to some accounts, murdered in Berkeley Castle in a manner so horrific it echoes through folklore. Their son, Edward III, ascends the throne. Young, determined, and shaped by betrayal, Edward is everything his father was not. His reign begins a golden age of chivalry, conquest, and calamity. It's Edward III who lights the fuse that becomes the 100 Years' War, a conflict that will drag England and France into a century of bloodshed. He claims the French crown through his mother, and in 1346, at the Battle of Crécy, English longbowmen bring down the French knights in a storm of arrows. It's a new kind of war, one where peasants can kill nobles, one where England starts to believe in its own power. But war isn't the only killer. In 1348, a silent assassin arrives, the Black Death. It sweeps through England, killing nearly half the population. Whole villages disappear, crops rot in the fields, the labor force collapses. But out of death, something stirs. Survivors demand better wages. They resist control. And slowly, the bonds of feudalism begin to crack. In 1381, it breaks. The Peasants' Revolt begins in Essex and Kent. Led by the mysterious Wat Tyler and the radical priest John Ball, the peasants march on London. Their message is revolutionary. When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? They storm the Capitol. They burn records. They demand justice. Young King Richard II meets them, promises reforms, and then betrays them. Tyler is killed in a skirmish, and the revolt is crushed. But the fear in the eyes of the ruling elite will never be forgotten. Richard II becomes a tyrant, paranoid, and vengeful. He exiles his rivals, hoards power, and ignores the will of Parliament. In 1399, his cousin Henry Bolingbroke returns from exile and seizes the throne. Richard is deposed, imprisoned, and likely murdered. Henry IV becomes king, not by divine right but by might. And so, the Plantagenet dynasty begins to fracture. Henry IV spends much of his reign fighting rebellions and illness, but his son, Henry V, is forged in fire. He becomes the warrior king of legend. In 1415 at Agincourt, his outnumbered army, mud-soaked and weary, defeats the French in one of the most famous battles in English history. Once again, the longbow is the weapon of the age. Thousands of French knights fall. Henry becomes a hero. England, for a brief moment, controls vast swathes of France. He even marries the French king's daughter, and their son is named heir to both thrones. But Henry V dies young. His son, Henry VI, becomes king at just 9 months old, and it all begins to fall apart. Henry VI is gentle, pious, and utterly unfit to rule. As France slips from England's grasp, chaos reigns. Joan of Arc rises in France, claiming divine guidance. She leads a revival that drives the English out of much of their occupied territory. Captured and burned by the English, her death does not stop her impact. The tide of war turns against England. At home, Henry VI's incompetence creates a power vacuum. Two powerful factions, the House of Lancaster and the House of York, clash for control of the throne. The Wars of the Roses begin. Brother turns against brother. Nobles shift sides like leaves in the wind. England becomes a battlefield. From this bloodbath rises Richard, Duke of York. He claims the throne, but is killed in battle. His son, Edward IV, takes up the fight and seizes the crown. For a time, peace seems possible, but betrayal and ambition remain. Richard III, the last Yorkist king, takes the throne under a cloud of suspicion. The princes in the Tower, Edward V and his younger brother, vanish under his watch. Whispers of murder haunt him. Then comes 1485, at Bosworth Field. Henry Tudor, a Lancastrian with a shaky claim, defeats Richard III. Richard dies in battle, the last English king to do so. His crown is found in the mud and placed on Henry's head. The Middle Ages end. A new era begins. The Tudor dynasty is born. And with it, England begins its long journey into modernity. But the echoes of the late Middle Ages never die. The Magna Carta. The rise of Parliament. The cries of peasants. The clash of kings. The birth of the nation. It's a tale of ambition, betrayal, war, and resilience. It's not just history. It's the making of England.